There is an agricultural system that has been feeding civilizations for 7,000 years without a single bag of synthetic fertilizer. It requires no chemicals, no expensive inputs, and no complicated machinery. The plants in this system actually fertilize each other, creating a self-sustaining cycle that can produce food almost indefinitely on the same piece of land. This system fed the ancient Maya Empire for centuries. It sustained the Iroquois, the Cherokee, and dozens of other indigenous nations across North and Central America. And yet today, almost no one uses it anymore. Modern agriculture has convinced us that we need to buy fertilizer every single year, that soil cannot maintain its fertility without constant chemical inputs. But that is simply not true. Our ancestors knew something that the fertilizer industry would prefer you forget, and I'm going to share it with you today. I spent over 30 years working in agricultural genetics, studying how plants grow, how soils function, and how we might feed a growing world without destroying the planet in the process. And in all that time, I never stopped being amazed by the elegance of this ancient system. It is called the Three Sisters, or Milpa in Mesoamerica, and it represents one of the most sophisticated examples of agricultural engineering in human history. Not engineering with machines and chemicals, but engineering with biology itself, using the natural relationships between plants to create something greater than any of them could achieve alone. The story begins somewhere between 7,000 and 4,000 years ago in what is now Mexico and Central America. Archaeological evidence suggests that farmers in this region were already growing corn, beans, and squash together as early as 7,000 years ago, though the full system as we know it today was firmly established throughout Mesoamerica by about 3,500 years ago. The Maya civilization built their entire empire on this foundation. Professor Adolfo Rodriguez, a milpa farmer in the Maya community of Maxcanu in the Yucatan, once told researchers that milpa has been the base of the culture of the Maya, of the religion of the Maya, of the preservation of the Maya. To work in the forest, he explained, you need to ask for permission of the owners of the forest. You need to ask the gods for the rain. And when the people harvest, they need to say thank you with special rituals to the gods. This was not just agriculture. This was a sacred relationship between humans, plants, and the earth itself. The great cities of Chichen Itza and Tikal, with their towering pyramids and complex societies, were fed by milpa farmers working the thin, rocky soil of the Yucatan Peninsula. Soil that by all modern standards should have been worthless for agriculture, but the Maya understood something that we have forgotten. They understood that plants can work together. They understood that the secret to sustainable agriculture is not fighting against nature, but working with it. The Three Sisters are corn, beans, and squash, and the way they interact is nothing short of remarkable. Corn grows tall and straight, reaching toward the sun with its broad leaves and sturdy stalk. But corn is also what scientists call a heavy nitrogen feeder. It pulls nitrogen out of the soil at a tremendous rate, and without that nitrogen, it cannot produce the large ears of grain that make it valuable as a food crop. In modern agriculture, we solve this problem by dumping synthetic nitrogen fertilizer onto our fields every single year. Farmers spend thousands of dollars on fertilizer, and the runoff from those fields pollutes our rivers and creates dead zones in our oceans. But the ancient farmers had a different solution. They planted beans. This simple act, repeated for thousands of years across countless generations, represents one of the most elegant solutions to an agricultural problem ever devised. Beans are legumes, and legumes have a superpower that no other plants possess. Their roots form a partnership with special bacteria called rhizobia that can pull nitrogen directly out of the air and convert it into a form that plants can use. This process is called nitrogen fixation, and it is essentially a fertilizer factory operating right there in the soil, powered by nothing but sunlight and the natural biology of the bean plant. When you plant beans next to corn, the beans replace the nitrogen that the corn removes. The two plants balance each other perfectly, creating a system that can maintain its fertility year after year without any external inputs. But the relationship goes even deeper than that. Corn provides something that beans desperately need, which is a structure to climb. Bean plants are vines that naturally want to grow upward toward the light, but they cannot stand on their own. In a monoculture bean field, farmers have to provide expensive trellises or accept lower yields from bush varieties. But when you plant beans with corn, the corn stalks become natural trellises. The beans wrap around the corn, climbing toward the sun without any additional infrastructure. The corn supports the beans, and the beans feed the corn. It is a partnership that benefits both plants. Neither plant could thrive as well alone as they do together. This is the essence of companion planting, and the Three Sisters is perhaps the oldest and most successful example of it in human history. And then there is the third sister, the squash. Squash plants grow low to the ground, spreading their broad leaves across the soil surface in a dense mat. This living mulch serves several crucial functions. It shades the soil, keeping it cool and moist during hot summer days. It suppresses weeds, reducing the need for cultivation or herbicides, and its prickly stems and leaves discourage pests like raccoons and deer from walking through the garden to eat the corn and beans. The squash protects its sisters while benefiting from the shade they provide, which prevents its leaves from scorching in the intense summer sun. In some regions, indigenous farmers also noted that the large squash leaves helped retain moisture in the soil by reducing evaporation, which was particularly valuable in areas with limited rainfall. The nutritional benefits of this system are just as impressive as its agricultural ones. Corn provides carbohydrates and some amino acids, but it lacks several essential nutrients that humans need. Beans provide the missing amino acids, creating a complete protein when combined with corn. They also contribute dietary fiber, B vitamins, iron, zinc, and other minerals. Squash adds vitamin A and additional nutrients. Together, these three crops provide nearly everything a human body needs to survive. This is why indigenous communities could thrive for centuries on this diet, why the great civilizations of Mesoamerica grew strong and numerous, why the Three Sisters became central to the mythology and spiritual life of so many cultures. The ancient peoples who developed this system were not just farmers. They were nutritionists, even if they did not have that word. I want to tell you about the science behind nitrogen fixation, because understanding this process is the key to understanding why you can forget about fertilizing your garden for years. When a bean seed germinates in the soil, its roots release chemical signals that attract rhizobium bacteria living in the surrounding earth. These bacteria enter the root hairs and trigger the formation of specialized structures called nodules. Inside these nodules, the bacteria convert atmospheric nitrogen, which makes up about 78% of the air we breathe, into ammonia that the plant can absorb and use to build proteins. This is the same chemical reaction that the Haber-Bosch process performs in industrial fertilizer plants, but the bean plant does it naturally, using only the energy from sunlight. The Haber-Bosch process, which was developed in the early 20th century, requires temperatures of around 400 degrees Celsius and pressures of about 200 atmospheres. It consumes approximately 1 to 2% of the world's total energy supply. But a humble bean plant achieves the same result at room temperature, using nothing but the sun. Research has shown that legumes can fix anywhere from 20 to 300 pounds of nitrogen per acre per year, depending on the species and growing conditions. Common garden beans are on the lower end of this range, fixing perhaps 40 to 50 pounds per acre. But that is still a significant amount of free fertilizer being produced right in your garden, year after year, without you having to do anything except plant the seeds. When the bean plants die at the end of the season, their nitrogen-rich roots decompose and release that nitrogen into the soil, where it becomes available for next year's crops. This is why experienced gardeners often leave bean roots in the ground after harvest, rather than pulling them up. The decomposing roots continue to feed the soil long after the plants themselves are gone. The Maya understood this cycle intimately, even without modern scientific instruments. Their traditional milpa system involved clearing a patch of forest, planting crops for 2 years, and then allowing the land to lie fallow for 8 years while secondary vegetation regrew. During this fallow period, wild legumes and other nitrogen-fixing plants would recolonize the soil, restoring its fertility naturally. Then the cycle would begin again. By rotating through multiple plots, Maya farmers could produce food almost indefinitely on the same land, without ever depleting the soil. Some modern Maya farmers have extended this fallow period to 10 or 15 years to increase fertility even further. By repeating this process continuously, land can be used for crops almost indefinitely. This is not a theoretical claim. It is a documented fact, proven by thousands of years of successful agriculture on some of the poorest soils in the world. This is the system that the fertilizer industry does not want you to know about. The global fertilizer market is worth over $200 billion per year. Companies have built enormous factories to synthesize nitrogen using the Haber-Bosch process, which requires massive amounts of natural gas and produces significant greenhouse gas emissions. They have created a system where farmers are dependent on annual purchases of their products, where soil is treated as an inert medium that must be constantly replenished with purchased inputs. But the Three Sisters offers a different path, a path where plants fertilize each other, where soil maintains its own fertility, where farmers and gardeners can break free from the cycle of dependence on chemical inputs. Have you ever grown corn, beans, and squash together in your garden? Have you ever tried the Three Sisters method that sustained civilizations for thousands of years? I would love to hear about your experiences in the comments. The good news is that you can start using this system in your own garden today. The traditional method involves creating small mounds of soil, about 12 inches high and 18 inches across, spaced about 4 feet apart. In the center of each mound, plant 4 or 5 corn seeds. When the corn is about 6 inches tall, plant 4 bean seeds around the base of the corn, a few inches away from the stalks. At the same time, plant 2 or 3 squash seeds at the edge of the mound. As the plants grow, the beans will climb the corn, and the squash will spread out between the mounds, covering the ground with its broad leaves. Choose your varieties carefully. Traditional varieties work best because they have been selected over generations to thrive in this system. For corn, look for tall varieties with sturdy stalks that can support the weight of climbing beans. Dent corn and flour corn work well. For beans, choose pole beans rather than bush beans, since pole beans are the climbers that will wrap around the corn. Scarlet runner beans and traditional varieties like Hidatsa shield figure are excellent choices. For squash, winter squashes with long vines work better than compact bush varieties. Butternut, acorn, and traditional varieties like Seminole pumpkin are good options. The key to success is timing. Corn needs a head start so that it is tall enough to support the beans when they start climbing. If you plant everything at once, the beans may outgrow the corn and pull it down. Wait until the corn is at least 6 inches tall, preferably closer to a foot, before planting the beans. The squash can go in at the same time as the beans. Water the mounds well after planting, and then let the system do its work. Some gardeners add a fourth sister to the mix, such as sunflowers planted at the north edge of the garden, to attract pollinators, or bee balm to bring in beneficial insects. The Iroquois sometimes included a fourth plant, often a wild green like amaranth or lamb's quarters, which would grow naturally among the cultivated crops and provide additional nutrition. You will be amazed at how the plants support each other, how the beans climb the corn, how the squash spreads out to shade the soil and suppress weeds. There is something deeply satisfying about watching this ancient system work, about seeing the same partnerships that sustained civilizations for millennia playing out in your own backyard. One of the most remarkable things about this system is how it improves over time. As you continue to grow the Three Sisters on the same plot year after year, the soil becomes richer and more fertile. The bean roots leave behind nitrogen that feeds subsequent crops. The organic matter from decomposing plant material builds soil structure and supports beneficial microorganisms. Unlike modern monoculture agriculture, which depletes soil over time and requires ever-increasing inputs of fertilizer to maintain yields, the Three Sisters actually builds soil fertility. It is regenerative agriculture in its purest form, developed thousands of years before that term was invented. I have seen gardens that have been planted with the Three Sisters for decades, and the soil in those gardens is dark and rich, full of earthworms and beneficial fungi, capable of producing abundant harvests without any purchased inputs whatsoever. The story of the Three Sisters is really a story about what we have lost in the pursuit of industrial efficiency. Our ancestors understood that agriculture is not a battle against nature, but a partnership with it. They observed the relationships between plants and learned to harness those relationships for their benefit. They created systems that could sustain civilizations for millennia without depleting the earth. And then we forgot all of that when European colonizers arrived in the Americas around 1500. They encountered indigenous farmers growing the Three Sisters and recorded their observations. But instead of learning from these sophisticated agricultural systems, the colonizers imposed their own methods. Methods that would eventually evolve into the industrial agriculture that dominates our world today. We replaced partnership with domination, observation with chemistry, sustainability with dependence on purchased inputs. But the knowledge is not truly lost. It survives in the practices of indigenous communities who still grow the Three Sisters today. It survives in the seed banks that preserve traditional varieties adapted to this system. It survives in the research of scientists who have documented the nitrogen-fixing capabilities of legumes and the synergistic relationships between companion plants. And it can survive in your garden if you choose to plant it. The germplasm bank in the Mexican state of Merida stores massive collections of seeds, including historical collections of crops the Maya have planted for generations. Similar seed banks around the world preserve the genetic heritage of traditional varieties, ensuring that this knowledge will never be completely lost. The fertilizer industry would prefer that you continue buying their products year after year. They have spent decades convincing farmers and gardeners that soil cannot maintain its fertility without constant chemical inputs. But that is a lie. For 7,000 years, indigenous farmers across the Americas proved that plants can fertilize each other, that soil can maintain its own fertility, that agriculture can be sustainable in the truest sense of the word. The Three Sisters is not just a gardening technique. It is a philosophy, a way of understanding our relationship with the land and with the plants that feed us. Modern agriculture treats plants as isolated individuals, each competing for resources in a zero-sum game. But the Three Sisters shows us a different truth. Plants can cooperate. They can support each other, feed each other, protect each other. When we plant them together in the right combinations, they create something greater than any of them could achieve alone. This is the wisdom that our ancestors understood, the wisdom that built empires and sustained civilizations, the wisdom that the modern world has tried so hard to make us forget. Robin Wall Kimmerer, a botanist and member of the citizen Potawatomi Nation, wrote that when she holds the Three Sisters in her hand, she holds the genius of indigenous agriculture. Together, she explained, these plants, corn, beans, and squash, are more than the sum of their parts. They are teachers, showing us how to live in relationship with the land. The choice is yours. you can continue to depend on a system that requires annual purchases, that depletes your soil, that pollutes your water, and that keeps you trapped in a cycle of dependence. Or you can plant the three sisters and discover what indigenous farmers have known for 7,000 years: that the earth can feed us without being destroyed, that plants can fertilize each other without synthetic chemicals, that a garden can sustain itself year after year, growing richer and more fertile with each passing season. The Three Sisters is waiting for you. It has been waiting for 7,000 years, patient and enduring, ready to teach anyone willing to learn. All you have to do is plant the seeds and let the sisters do what they have always done, what they were born to do, what they have been doing since long before the pyramids of Egypt were built or the first cities rose in Mesopotamia. They will feed you, they will feed your soil, and they will show you a different way of being in relationship with the earth. If you found value in this, consider subscribing and sharing it with someone who needs to hear this story. There is so much more to uncover.